KSN Studios located in the mountain region of western North Carolina. You are listening to the Ourlads Football Radio Network.
All right, it's Wednesday, the 30th of August, 2017, and welcome to the premiere episode of the Ourlads Football Radio Network. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and this is several years in the making. We're real excited about bringing you the very best football coverage, thanks to my first guest and the owner of the top pro football scouting service available on the net, Dan Shonka of Ourlads.com. And Dan, you've been with us for many years with our draft talk, and we've been talking about this off the air for several years, and I'm finally glad that here we are ready to go.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Greg, it's something very unique, and I think it brings the fans a new and fresh look at things, and certainly from our point of view, with my pro football background, it's everybody out there puts insider, and I think the only time they've been inside something is they might have been inside an outhouse at a football game, So I think that the thing, certainly in our guests, will start being able to give a real fresh feel to football, both pro and college.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And, of course, we also have our fantasy coverage, and we're going to have our first fantasy show tomorrow with Jamal Murphy, who's the chief fantasy analyst at Ourlads now. So he's doing a great job. He's going to continue to do that all season. So fantasy full-time. And, again, we're talking about not just the shows, but we're talking about content. A lot of content, fantasy, college football, NFL, up and above what you already have produced at Ourlads.com with your scouting services, your depth charts for the pro and college game, and, of course, much more. By the way, coming up in about 20 minutes, when I say goodbye to you, will be an old friend of ours, the founder of ProFootballFocus.com, Neil Hornsby. So I'm really excited to talk to Neil. I haven't talked to him in a while. And then Evan Tex Western, the managing editor for AcmePackingCompany.com. That's a Green Bay Packers website powered by SBNation.com. Evan did some shows for me a couple of years ago. Very knowledgeable, knows what he's talking about with the Packers. So we got a lot to talk about with the Green Bay Packers coming up in about less than an hour. So that's our first show, and I'll fill everybody in that's listening about what the show is going to be like tomorrow. That starts at 2:30. So let's get right to it, Dan. We only got about 20 minutes. So first of all, let's just talk about what everybody wants to talk about always, especially talking to you, and that is the quarterback position of course, we have the draft that just happened and the draft that's going to come up next season. Before we get to next season, what did you think? How surprised are you on what you've – I guess the two quarterbacks out of the four rookie quarterbacks drafted in the first round, Trubisky and Kaiser, have been getting all the pub. We knew Mahomes wasn't going to start. Watson had a chance, but I guess that's not happening. But were you really surprised that Kaiser got the start, and based on what you've seen in the preseason as well?
Yeah, I'd say I think what they want there is they want to get going fresh. And all the reports actually out of Cleveland were Osweiler was, the guy. But then once things started, Kaiser hasn't set the world on fire, but, he's a guy that they're going to build the team around.
Yeah, what I've seen in the preseason is a guy that is definitely making a lot of the throws, but he's also looking like it looks like one of these guys that's in his first season is going to have his share of exciting plays, but he's also going to have his share of turnovers.
He kind of looks like a rookie.
But you know what? In a way, though, he looks like he's maybe I understand why they're starting him, because at least he does look like he's making some positive plays. Because some rookies look like they're just completely lost and they're really bad before they get good. He looks like he's at least making some plays.
Yeah, he is, and I think that which is really amazing because he could be at Notre Dame for 2 more years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
so it's a work in progress, but hey, some of these rookie quarterbacks have done well. Look at Cooper Rush down at Dallas.
Yeah.
He's had a real good, preseason, and so some of the guys that, although I think that Kaiser would even been a little better if he had a lot of work under center there at Notre Dame. But it is what it is, and I think that he's going to be. He was our top underclass quarterback, last fall,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe he's going to live up to that. Although he really struggled at Notre Dame last year, but he's got the tools. He's smart. I think that the only thing I think it's still out to school to see if this guy is going to be dedicated in the off season, and we want to see how great a quarterback he wants to be, because everybody knows that it's what you do in the off season to get you ready for the season. Because now, hey, it's like ping pong anymore during the practices and stuff. They don't hit anybody. They can't. Only
Sure.
so many hours. In the same way in college, only so many hours you can be on the field and work. And so it's the guys that spend time on their own are the ones that are going to step up.
And by the way, speaking of fall last year, we're at that time pretty much now. When are you going to have your early 2018 draft information out?
Oh yeah, the 2018 preview, it comes out. We always like to get a couple, 2 or 3 games under the belt, and then get it printed. So it'll be printed late September, and we'll be out that first week in October.
Okay. And by the way, as you mentioned, Kaiser had a couple of years of eligibility left. There's a guy that people think would be the top quarterback if he decides to come out after this season, would have a couple of years of eligibility left, and that's Sam Darnold out of USC. Now, it's interesting when they were talking about Darnold being the first pick, and then he came out and said, well, wait a second, I didn't say I was coming out. Now, whether that's the truth or not, if he has another really good year and maybe he wins the Heisman and wins a national championship, it's a foregone conclusion he's coming out. So there's still a lot of factors, of course, that are going to be involved. But when you watch this kid play, especially in some of the bigger games at the end of the season, he had a huge bowl game and a tremendous game, which could have been a championship game, USC and Penn State. What did you see in him?
Yeah, I think that to me, it was hard to believe that he was a freshman,
Mm-hmm.
And he's big, he's strong, he's smart. I think the thing is that Darnold is a guy that, he's not from the poor side of town, so he doesn't have to come out in the draft for money or what have you. So, he may stick around another year, and I'm sure that his advisors will be looking to see who's going to be that top spot out there too before he would make any decision, because he might not want to go to the couple teams that are there at the top. Because I tell you what, you want some people around you.
Sure.
Like say for instance, a place like the Jets. The Jets, they're going to have a good defense.
Oh yeah, they're desperate. They're desperate for a quarterback.
And they've needed a quarterback forever.
Yes.
But he might say, hey, that might be a good place for me if they, build up their offensive line, and they got some good young receivers. They got some things. So, but you don't know. We're a long way away from that.
Yeah.
And, so.
And on the flip side, you don't want to go to Jacksonville or a place like that, I'm assuming. I don't know where would be could you pick like the worst possible place that right now, from what you see with the coaching staffs, or the way the rosters are set, which place would you, if you were Sam Darnold's agent or his dad, you would not want him to go, and you would say, go back to school?
Well, I think that, we're going to see what teams are going to be vying for that spot. But I see Jacksonville, what they want to do there, they want to run the ball so they can get by with, you got to throw to keep people off balance. But as long as Tom Coughlin's going to be there,
that's true.
I know he's going to want to run the ball.
Yep.
And, but on the other hand, they may say, Darnold's family may say, well, hey, here's a place we can go. They're not going to count on it to be, throwing touchdown passes all the time, but hey, they got a defense around them. They're building in their offensive line there, and that may be a spot. But the thing is too, sometimes you got to look at a team's track record, and that's not very good at Jacksonville. And hey, for that matter, it's not great at the Jets either.
What about Buffalo? Because Buffalo sure is making a lot of moves to stockpile draft picks. And if there's any team right now that has the ammunition to move up, if they end up like 8th or 9th in the overall to that first pick, they're probably the team.
Yeah, I think the thing that I always worry about though is warm weather quarterbacks, going to the north.
Okay.
You just, unless you're from, a cold area, I mean, it bothers me. Even, Aaron Rodgers, he's from the northern part of California where it's not, all sun and stuff. It's cool. And he's done fine. But I think there's something to that sometimes when you're, looking at the weather and things but, Darnold, that would be a place that certainly that, if they're going to be up there picking, I think that would be in his mix.
Okay. And then you got the other quarterbacks. You got Josh Rosen. So everybody kind of believes it's going to be depending because remember, just a year ago, before the season began, it was Josh Rosen that was the hot quarterback. And nobody knew who Sam Darnold was. So how do we know by the end of this season, Josh Rosen will overtake Sam Darnold? It's entirely possible. What's the big difference between the two?
Well, I think maturity. To me, just from the outside looking in, Josh Rosen seems like a whiner.
Okay.
I don't think he's a real leader. I
Okay.
think Darnold he kind of commands leadership, whereas Rosen is kind of, he just right now. He seems like he whines about everything. And I tell you what, to me, I don't want a quarterback that's a whiner.
All right. Are you surprised? I was really surprised. Now, again, this isn't coming from you, but when I started hearing, okay, these are the quarterbacks to keep an eye on next year, when I heard Josh Allen's name. And I only say that, and look, I was the biggest Wyoming fan last year. I was so happy to see Ball, what he was doing there, turning that program around, and watched Allen in a lot of games. Never in my wildest dreams that I ever imagined that he would be looked at as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL draft, though. But I'm not a scout, so the kid's got to be there's got to be something there that I'm not seeing. So what are you seeing?
Well, I didn't have him up there either because when the scuttlebutt started coming out, that he was thinking about coming out and this and that, and I go, you got to be kidding me. As I looked at a bunch of Wyoming film now, he lost a lot of receivers and he lost his top running back. So
yeah,
well, it'd be real interesting to see what he does this year. He's going to get a test right off the bat at the University of Iowa. They play this weekend, and Iowa's not going to take any prisoners. Now, they've got a good scheme. I like Craig Bull, the head coach there at Wyoming. But I think that, people are talking about, oh, man, here's going to be another Carson Wentz and this and that because he was in the same scheme. Something that's going to help, him is he's going to be in a pro-style offense.
Okay.
And that is a plus. We've seen that. Guys that come out of pro-style offenses seem like they catch on a little quicker. And but no, when I was studying him last year, and he did. This wasn't a guy that said, "Hey, man, this is the second coming of Brett Favre," you know what I mean, or something like that. To me, he would have been. I don't know if he would have went. It would have been a real projection to take him in the first round. Somebody would have had to really, say. Of course, all those quarterbacks last year that
true.
The people moved up for him.
Yeah, that's right.
But time will tell on those guys. But I don't, right now, I wouldn't say that, Josh Allen's going to be a top 5 guy, but, things can change. We saw that. Hey, Trubisky never took a snap, until the start of last year, and he was second pick in the draft.
Yeah, it's a big difference between where a player is drafted and where he really should be drafted. And that's what we see with quarterbacks every year. So, they always go much higher than we anticipate. Quickly, guys like Rudolph, the Heisman winner Jackson, and the playoff quarterback Browning from Washington. Those are other notable names. Are those other guys to keep an eye on? The top guys?
Yeah, I think Rudolph from Oklahoma State, definitely. Big, strong guy. He did a lot of good things last year. Of course, he's going to have a great receiver this year in Charles Washington. Loved Washington last year. Thought he was going to come out. He didn't. Like him. He's got to take another step forward, but he's in that spread offense and this and that. We're just going to have to see what happens. But Browning, Jake Browning is. I'll tell you exactly what he's like. He's like the quarterback at Dallas, the backup,
Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore for Boise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it Kellen Moore?
Yeah.
Oh man, I must have had a brain freeze but yeah, he's a lot like Kellen. Okay. And
that's not a good thing.
Great arm.
That's not good. Yeah.
He doesn't have a great arm, but he's really a smart guy. Knows to go with the ball, where to go with the ball. And he last year, if you studied the Washington film, man, he really underthrew the deep passes to Ross. You know, I mean, Ross had to wait, take a fair catch it, and then take off running again. And so, he's probably going to be a late round free agent guy in my mind. Not a real strong guy. McSorley, not much there. Lamar Jackson, he's not going to be an NFL quarterback, I don't believe. So he's not accurate. And the thing is, when people are looking for quarterbacks, you better be accurate, or you might as well head on down the road.
All right. And by the way, would you, from what you've seen so far in the preseason, would you start Trubisky?
That's a really good question. I like a lot. Of course, now they built, the plays and things for him. He boots well, throws well on the run, but you know what? That accuracy is just scary. And now, I don't know if I'd start him the first game, but if it was a disaster, I think that I'd hustle him in, because he might as well let go, because he did a lot of really good things in the preseason that I liked, and that I think that the brass, the Bears like. So I think that I think it's going to be a real short leash, there before he goes in.
Okay, and you meant scary good, his accuracy.
Scary good, yes.
Okay, last thing I want to ask you about, and that is the Florida State-Alabama game. So we've got 5 minutes to go. Biggest game of the weekend, of course. Could be the biggest game of the year. We're all waiting to see how Nick Saban reloads once again, even though he's got his quarterback back, but and Ridley back. But there's a lot of guys we don't know who are, I guess, will be the next wave. So you tell me, from what you've seen, start with Alabama. Who are the next wave of players that we may not have heard of necessarily because we were paying attention to all the other guys that were drafted last year? Who's coming next?
Well, I'll tell you. They've got such a load of guys. Again, the secondary. You look at Minka Fitzpatrick. You look at Anthony Everett. They've got the guys that haven't played. They'll step in there and play. And the offensive line is deep. That they lose some offensive linemen, but I'm telling you right now that they're going to be ready to go, and they're just all those guys don't have all those stars behind their name for nothing. They come in there, and Scarborough, the running back, who really they probably would have won the national championship if he didn't get hurt. Remember how he's hammering, he was hammering things away, and he just he got injured, and so he was out. But I tell you, Alabama they've just got depth beyond belief, and there's Robert Foster here. He's a third-year senior. A lot of people hadn't heard of him, and he's a terrific player. Their offensive line, but see, the thing is, now Hurts, the quarterback, hopefully his accuracy's picked up, because that's what killed him. It doesn't matter how good your receivers are. Like Ridley's a great receiver, but if you can't get him the ball, it doesn't make any difference. And of course, they got a new coordinator and stuff too, so we'll see how that works out. And but I think that this should be a great game.
And Fitzpatrick, their top-rated guy right now?
Yeah, but Hand to be in there too. He got in a little trouble, But Deshaun Hand, defensive lineman.
Okay.
But I would say Fitzpatrick is probably, at least early, you'd say that he was probably their top prospect. But hey, there's,
all right, and
others in that mix.
And in the last 2 minutes, Florida State. Tell me who we should look out for as far as potential top picks next season.
Well, you got to start with I always like those big guys up front, and both sides of the ball. But defensively, you definitely got to look at Derek Nada from Florida State. He's anchoring the inside there. a very talented guy. I think that they don't have a ton of seniors. I think they got one that's going to be on offense. The right tackle, Rick Leonard, is a senior.
Okay.
And then Nada is a senior. So, he's probably going to be, in that mix. Now, Derwin James, he's a redshirt sophomore. If he comes out and he's healthy, he's injured last year, he may be their top prospect if he's healthy and things like that. But they don't have a ton of seniors either. They got a strong safety, Marshall, that's a senior, and Matthews, a will linebacker, weak side linebacker. So their linebackers have got some age, a little bit age on them in regard. They're seniors, but they're a fairly young team too.
Who do you like better, the Alabama corner or McFadden from Florida State?
I tell you what, I think right now I'd have to say Fitzpatrick.
Okay.
But hey, like I said, it's early.
That's right.
Change.
All right. Before I let you go, our next guest is Neil Hornsby, and he's the founder of ProFootballFocus.com, and he's on the line right now. So I'm going to bring Neil in. Neil, how you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
Doing good, Neil. Thanks a lot for doing this. Appreciate it. It's our first show, and the timing was really right on. And I know I got you guys to talk a few years ago, and I just want to state this out there for anybody who's listening for the first time, anybody that doesn't know about you guys, or maybe they do. Without a doubt, two people I respect the most in the industry, and the two people I've known the longest in the industry. From what you've done, of course, Neil. With Pro Football Focus is absolutely amazing, and I'm just real happy to see how successful you've become and the site has become.
Well, that's really kind of you. Thank you.
And Dan, I know that you guys know each other. You don't get a chance to talk too much, but what is it that I know you, Chris. You're an old-fashioned guy, Dan. So what is it that you've come to respect about Pro Football Focus?
Well, I think it's all encompassing in regards to looking at these players from a different point of view, and I think that a lot of times you have the old school opinion on things, and things kind of status quo, and I think things that Neil and his crew have done is give a fresh look on these players and a different perspective, and I think that really. The NFL teams could, and many of them have, taken advantage of Neil and his crew's work, and they making football better.
All right. Well, Dan, I appreciate your time. I know we're going to be talking, of course, all season long, probably every week or two, leading up into the 2018 NFL draft. So. Thanks a lot for your time. And again, the first is it going to be one of those little guides, or is it going to be a newsletter that's going to come out for the 2018 to early draft information?
No, it'll be a booklet.
Booklet.
Got it. Yep.
And that's coming out again when, in a few weeks?
Yeah, at the end of September, or depending on where you live, early October.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks a lot. Hey, hi, Neil.
Yeah, take care, Dan.
All right. So, Neil.
Yeah. Can I just say a little word about Ourlads and
yes.
What Mr. Shonka does before he's very, very kind about me? Ourlads was one of the first groups that actually inspired me to start understanding a little bit about the draft. I've got all of their guides back to 1983. They're sitting there on the shelf beside me. And I can't pretend that the first one I got was 1983, but I can tell you that the first one I got was 1988,
wow.
Which probably dates me a little bit. And then I went back and got the other ones. But they've always been incredibly accurate. I love their depth charts. I love what they do. And if anybody's not heard a lot about them, then I would suggest they go out and get those their guides and their guide to the season.
Appreciate that, Neil. So let's do a background again on Pro Football Focus, because we've known each other for now, I think, about 15 years. I remember.
Wow, is it going back that far?
Yeah, it has. Because when I first started my network was when I first really started talking to you, and so that's why I can kind of date it approximately at that time. And I know when we first started talking, it was, of course, I used to talk to you from Europe because that's where you were. You were in England.
Yeah.
And so we didn't get a chance to talk too much because of that. But we did. And then you were, of course, always trying to explain to me what you were doing. And it was brand new. Nobody's ever tried this before. So, but when I heard it, sounded something very interesting, like it would be a success if you were able to, luck plays a big part in it. But you have to be real smart and you have to have a nice a business plan. And lo and behold, you took it to incredible heights. And then just a couple of years ago, so you sold the business to a group that included or was led by Chris Collinsworth. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, Chris is the majority shareholder, and I thought long and hard before we made the decision. Obviously, it's the PFF is a little bit like my fifth child, the daughter I never had, and I'm equally protective of PFF as I'd be of my daughter. And she's in safe hands, is all I can say. We made a really good decision. And Mr. Collinsworth is all and more that that you get the impression of him off television. So he's a fine man. He's a man of great integrity, and he's been nothing but a boon to the business.
So tell me, Neil, then right now, after you sold the business, you're still with them. So what is your day-to-day work involvement with the company?
So I'm the chief operating officer. I'm not grading games anymore. They took that away from me some years ago. They said whilst I was very good and very accurate, they somewhat patted me on the head and patronizingly told me I wasn't quick enough anymore to do the games. So they put me out to the pasture of the management side of the business.
All right.
That's what I do. I look after, I have 7 reports into me who look after everything from finance and HR, servicing our team customers, sales, our IT team who are brilliant. And, and by no means forgetting our data acquisition team, led by Carl Edelstead, who just a phenomenal 300 and about 25 people now we have on the data acquisition side of the business.
Wow. That's that's big time, and that's where you are right now. You got to feel so proud when you watch the Sunday night games, the games on NBC, of course, with Chris there, especially, and you see the Pro Football Focus stats and information that goes out now to millions of fans. I mean, that must be an incredible feeling.
Yeah, it is, and NBC have been a tremendous supporter of ours. Fred Godelli's been huge, the producer for Sunday Night Football, because realistically, Chris has nothing. People may say, "Oh, Chris is maneuvering these graphics onto the the screen."
Because
if anybody knows anything about Fred Godelli, who's the best producer in the business, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to football games, they will know that Fred would not do anything he didn't think would bring his broadcast to life. So I've been very grateful for Fred's diligence and the fact that he's taken us on board. But we're also now working with CBS and with Fox as well on the broadcast side of things, and that's a great place to be.
And I know we had talked about this as well, as far as because when you revolutionize an industry like you have, there's always going to be the copycats. There's always going to be people that are going to try to do it better than you, try to do it different. Have you encountered any of that?
It's not yet. I'm still waiting. I think it's such a high barrier to entry. It's such a difficult market to get into, and you're always facing the fact that there's the incumbent in the marketplace. We have 30 of the 32 NFL teams, 24 of the college teams, and most of the major college teams. All of the big networks. So there's a large barrier to overcome for anybody who wants to take that task on. Sure. That's fine. If somebody wants to do it, then I always think that competition hones you and makes you better.
Sure.
And we take it that somebody's going to be coming along any second. By every year, we're trying to grow the difference between us and whoever the next person is, whatever that is. But it's been a good ride so far. There'll be bumps, I'm sure, along the journey, but we haven't finished yet. We've got a lot more to do on the college side of things, and we're just starting high school football now. We're having a lot of success. It's exciting. We've got a week's worth of games under our belt. And for those people in the Cincinnati area, then they're on WLWT. They're going to see a lot of PFF high school football.
That's awesome.
Which is phenomenal, I think. And I'm as excited about this as what I was when we started with the NFL.
What was your I don't even know if I recall, but like, is NFL your preferred, or always has been your preferred sport? Like, what's the difference to you as far as how you enjoy the pro game as opposed to the college game?
There wasn't a lot of the college game. In the UK, you could only really get the NFL.
Okay.
So I became immersed in the NFL, and my knowledge of the NFL is pretty good. My knowledge of the college game, I wouldn't say is at all. I can hold my own with pretty much most people on at an NFL level. There's a real you can fill large states with people who know more about college football than me.
Okay. Well, let's get into the NFL because we got about 20 minutes, and I wanted to. But before I get into I want to get your opinion on every division, who you think might win the division. The Joe Hayden news may or may not come as a surprise to many fans, and I say may because I guess if they're not paying too much attention to the Cleveland Browns and they don't subscribe to Pro Football Focus, they probably don't realize how much he's struggled over the last few years. I know there's been a lot of injuries, and then of course he's got the salary. So, but people who do subscribe to Pro Football Focus and they've been paying attention, maybe this shouldn't be a surprise that the Browns let him go. So, do you think now that he is going to be a cheaper Joe Hayden, I can't imagine he's going to be on the street very long. What do you think? Have you noticed anything yourself, or is there something that you can pinpoint? Is it injuries? Like, what has happened to Joe Hayden?
Well, I'm not. The truth of the matter is, I'm not sure. But I think the straw that broke the camel's back, really, as far as Joe Hayden was concerned, was this preseason. I don't think the Browns went into the preseason expecting to cut Joe Hayden.
Okay.
For one moment. But he is by far our lowest graded player on their defense.
Wow.
And that's including everybody. And that's despite playing more snaps than anybody else on, the cornerbacks. He's played 85 snaps in the 3 preseason games so far, which is not an insignificant amount. He's been thrown on pretty much at will. And he looks like a guy who is lost confidence and or alternatively doesn't want to be there.
True.
But it's a shame because the rest of the Browns defense is coming together relatively nicely. I know it's only the preseason, but we've seen much better performances from Kyle Nassib, than we had previously. Myles Garrett has looked every single bit the player that everybody thought he would be. Joe Schaubert's come along nicely.
Yeah.
Most players on the Cleveland defense have been playing well. They brought in Jason McCourty. Jason McCourty's played quite well. Jason McCourty from Tennessee, and long-time Tennessee player. And they're just putting together a rather solid group. And Joe Hayden at his best. Well, here's the thing that most people forget or don't even know about Joe Hayden.
Okay.
Joe Hayden's best season by far was his rookie season, 2010. He was extremely good. He was probably all-pro good, maybe just Pro Bowl, but he was a real talent. And I can remember one game against Brandon Lloyd where he went head-to-head with Brandon Lloyd, who is a difficult route runner, and it was a fabulous thing to behold. he was really, really good. But ever since then, he dropped off. He was still reasonably good, 2011 through 2014. Then 2015, he was terrible for the 200 and odd snaps he played. And then last year, again, he was poor, well below average. He also missed 10 tackles into the bag, and something he's never done really before as a run defender. And he just hasn't been the same player. The problem with a lot of players in the NFL is once they get a reputation, which Joe Hayden did in his first year, he didn't really shake it. But he's only really ever lived up to the Joe Hayden reputation in 1 year, and that was 2010. So, and beyond that, he's been good or better than average for maybe 4 years, but the last 2 years he's been poor, and this preseason he's been exceptionally poor. And I think that was the final straw that made the Browns let him go.
And a little money. That definitely has.
Well, obviously there's the money.
Yeah.
I suspect that they may have kept a talent at that amount of money, but he would, to be honest, at any amount of money, I would have let him go given his performance over the last 2 years and particularly the performance in the preseason.
Sounds his background kind of sounds like Matt Khalil. Have a good.
Well, yeah, there's an interesting one. Played really well and has played poorly ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Injuries have played a particular part.
Yeah.
He goes down to Carolina, who have high hopes for him, and that's okay. He's had some success, but he's had other games where he's struggled. He's looked a little bit like what you would expect him to look, which is a guy just coming back from injury. He's struggled in run defense. As a run blocker in particular, a little bit. Nothing bad, nothing particularly poor, but not really the sort of guy that you would go out and pay that amount of money for at the moment. But the hope was from them that he would improve. So let's wait and see.
All right, now let's go over these divisions, and we'll start with the AFC East, Neil. So we know what the deal is there. So I guess the question then really is, can anybody stop the Patriots? Now, maybe the Edelman injury will help, even though we've seen this before with the Patriots. We've seen it with Gronk. I mean, especially last year. Doesn't matter. They can lose a guy or two, and doesn't matter. That's how much better they are than anybody else. And I think we saw that in the Super Bowl. And I think it's more of, I think there's just I think it's more of even a coaching difference. I just think that there's something. We know how great that sideline is over in New England. I just think they're heads and above among every other team in the NFL. You have the Patriots and everyone else, and that's why it's so difficult, even when it looks like they're beating their butts, like in the Super Bowl, for anybody to really knock them off.
So I would go one stage further than that. I would say the Patriots would win any single division that they were in.
Sure.
So you could put them in any division and they'd win.
Yes.
And I think you could put any of the guys that I've got as division winners from any other division into the AFC East outside the Patriots, and they would win the AFC East as well. I think, it's shot to pieces. Not only are the Patriots the best team in the NFL, but the rest of the AFC East are the worst teams in the NFL.
Yeah.
The Jets in particular, I don't mean to rub it in, but know that is a franchise that's not heading in a good direction at the moment. It's struggling without a quarterback. They had our lowest pass rushing grade in the whole of the preseason. And at times it's just been incredibly difficult for them. I think the Dolphins are not a bad team. I think they've had a lot of talent. They had a lot of talent come in, and then injuries just utterly decimated them. They've lost Raekwon McMillan, they've lost Koa Misi, they've lost Lippett, and they've lost Ryan Tannehill. I mean, I think the Dolphins are a good team that could compete, but not with that amount of losses. And then the Bills look like they've decided that they're going to rebuild, letting Sammy Watkins go, letting Darby go. I know the Darby thing was a scheme, potentially a scheme issue, but I would have still kept Darby. So I don't think anybody can compete with New England, and I suspect 14-2 looks a reasonable assumption of what they'll do.
That's a low bar, more than likely, for the Patriots. In the North, we don't really, any year you don't know what to expect between the top three, Cincinnati, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. We know that's going to happen. Maybe Cleveland's better. And by the way, we should mention Greg Williams has a lot to do with that defense in Cleveland as well. But I don't know. Cincinnati, I'm just not sure of. They finally dropped off, and I just wonder, this whole Burfict thing is a huge distraction. It's their own fault. And then the whole Mixon thing. We've talked about that years ago, and they're still doing the same crazy stuff. Can Baltimore or Cincinnati overtake Pittsburgh?
Maybe it's the fact that I live in Cincinnati that's rubbing off on me. I don't know. I just think that I just think that too many people are writing them off. You can say Joe Mixon. I'm gonna go one further. Joe Mixon is one of the best runners I've seen in the last 20 years. Some of the stuff that he did at Oklahoma and some of the stuff that he does that he did in the preseason is just unbelievable. He's got a vision that makes Jeremy Hill look like he's standing still.
Sure.
And I think he's a phenomenal runner. I think the kid's done everything that they've asked him to do. He's not been a bad kid by any stretch of the imagination. I understand the problem, but he's done what he needed to do to get beyond that now. And I think, I for one don't want to talk about it anymore. As long as nothing else happens.
Yep.
I understand the Burfict thing. It was purely stupid. It was very, very stupid. I think he got what he deserved, frankly, from what I saw. But this is a team that has got what I considered six potential first-round draft picks on it that have never seen a snap in the NFL regular season. So that's the two. So that's Ross, who I thought was a potential, was a first-round draft pick.
Yep.
Mixon, who could have easily gone in the first round. Jordan Willis, who is fantastic and who's been fantastic all preseason in terms of getting to the quarterback. Carl Lawson, who's been nothing short of phenomenal.
Right.
They got him in the fourth round. That was unbelievable. And then they've got the two kids from last year, William Jackson, the corner from Houston, who's playing really well. And looking like he could be one of the best cornerbacks they've got at the moment. And they've got Billings, who maybe hasn't been quite as good as he was at Baylor, but who has the potential to come in and clog up the middle. So they've got all of those guys that nobody's talking about. I think the offensive line, Paul Alexander's a great coach. I think the offensive line is going to be better than people think after losing Ziegler and Whitworth. But it's just a difficult decision. I just don't see Roethlisberger being healthy the whole season. And as soon as you go away from Roethlisberger, that team just collapses. And this is how bad it is. I trust Andy Dalton more than I trust Joe Flacco. That's the bottom line. Yeah, that's how little I've come to put any faith at all in Joe Flacco.
Yeah, and it's kind of tough too for Flacco in the sense that he hasn't had the greatest coaching on offense behind him recently. He hasn't had a lot of weapons recently. But yeah, we expect more from Joe Flacco after what we saw from him.
We do expect more. I expect more from Andy Dalton. I wish Andy Dalton would get in some of his team's face from time to time. But anyway, we better move on. We could talk forever, but we'll never get through all these in
all right.
minutes.
So who wins the division?
Oh, I'm going with Cincinnati.
Okay. South, is it Houston and that's it? Because Luck, we don't even know if he's going to play.
It's really down to two, isn't it? So it's down to the Texans and it's down to the Titans. I just think the Texans' defense will be too strong. I think everybody's talking about it. It could be one of the all-time, that's too much. But it could be a really, really powerful unit if Clowney comes through, Watt stays healthy. They've got some really good players, and that Zach Cunningham kid doesn't look too bad either, does he?
No, and it's another underrated player that was a bargain, draft pick. But we don't know about the quarterback situation. But then again, Marcus Mariota has to stay healthy. Andrew Luck's not playing, so the whole division is really it's not very strong. Let's just put it that way.
No,
they don't
and
have
that's
a New
why
England.
I'm going with the Texans.
Yeah,
at the end of the day, I think they will pick on the other team's quarterbacks and probably win out. I could see the Titans win it. Unless Luck's back very, very quickly and at full strength, I just can't see the Colts winning. And Jacksonville seems to have a lot of problems of their own.
All right, and then in the West, Kansas City, they probably are the favorites right now. Maybe Oakland if Carr's healthy. Denver's got the defense. Not sure about the quarterback. So, and you never know about Phillip Rivers if they can ever stay healthy over there. So it's a wide open division in a sense.
I'm not quite so sure. I look at Oakland and I like that offensive line. I like Marshawn Lynch running behind that offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's perfect. He's never, ever run behind a good offensive line.
That's
never
true.
once.
That's true.
And he's never ran behind a good offensive line, and he's still been, for me, and I know people think this is sacrilege, but I think he's the best back of the last 10 years, Marshawn Lynch. I think he's been better than Adrian Peterson over the whole course. There have been seasons where Peterson's been better, but over the whole course of their careers, I would choose Marshawn Lynch as much as anything because he always ran behind poor lines. This is the very first time he's running behind a good line. Play action is the key to the NFL. If there's one thing that comes up time and time again, it's the threat of the running game to keep linebackers honest, make sure that safeties aren't cheating, keep safeties cheating up, keep 8 men in the box. And I just think Oakland have got an offense that, if it all goes to plan, could be a fantastic thing to behold.
Okay, so let's do the NFC. We'll do a minute. So NFC East, who do you like?
I like the Giants. I've been off Eli for a long period of time, but they've just given him so many weapons. I don't think the offensive line will be that bad again. And the defense is really, really coming together. They're just killing people now. Jason Pierre-Paul looks back to his best. I'm going with the Giants.
Okay, and the North, and by the way, Evan Tex Western is our next guest. He'll be with us in about 5 minutes to talk Green Bay Packer football. So, Packers, right?
Yeah, it is the Packers. There's nowhere else to go. The old adage, if you're not even sure, go with the quarterback, and that makes it a slam dunk, really. The Vikings just haven't really moved on. Like the look of Dalvin Cook, but the offensive line doesn't look as if it's moved on at all. Chicago is, I like more than most people, particularly the defense, but it's a rebuilding year for them. And Detroit, I love Matthew Stafford. I think he's really come on, but I just don't think the rest of the team wants, coming close to where Green Bay will be.
All right, in the South, we had Carolina going to the Super Bowl and losing a close game. Then the next year, Atlanta goes to the Super Bowl and blows it. So, and look what happened to Carolina after their Super Bowl. Nobody expected Carolina to have the season they had last season. So, are we about to see another version of the Buffalo Bills with the Falcons after the way they were psychologically damaged? That they'll be fine. They'll get to the postseason. Maybe they go to another Super Bowl. But when they get there, they're not going to be able to get over the hump, especially if they face the Patriots.
That's possible, but I still see them being the cream of this division. I like what they've done on defense. I like, the fact that they've got linebackers who can now cover. They've got some pass rushers. They've got cornerbacks. They've got a defense, and then the offense just hasn't lost anybody. It's lost nothing. No. It'll only be better. So I think this is possibly one of the best divisions in football now, but I still think that the Falcons are the cream.
Okay. And by the way, do you buy in on Tampa as a playoff team?
No, but I think they'll be a good team.
Okay. And
I think it'll be a good team, but I don't buy them as a playoff team, no.
Okay. And then finally, in the West, Seattle, of course. What can you say about Seattle? Except, of course, we know about Pete Carroll. We know about Russell Wilson. We also know that their offensive line has probably been the worst offensive line in football for 10 years running, and they lose their left tackle. So are teams like Seattle and Green Bay, we know how good they are. Are they good enough to beat New England?
I'm not even sure that Seattle clearly is. If Russell Wilson's standing at the end of this season, then they'll be in the playoffs, I suspect. But I just can't see. Russell Wilson is the most underrated player in football. Nobody else in football would stand a prayer behind that offensive line.
Yep.
And Russell Wilson somehow gets them to the playoff year after year after year. I just think if you put Russell Wilson behind a good offensive line, he would be a superstar, and nobody would be able to hum and ha just because he was a third-round draft pick and they didn't like the fact that he's done so well. And I also think you could take Tom Brady, you could take Aaron Rodgers, and you could stick anybody behind that offensive line, and they would struggle hugely. So I just don't see it hanging together. I think Russell will probably be injured again, unfortunately. And therefore, I'm going with the Cardinals.
Oh.
I think they've just got the best overall group. I think they'll pull it back together again. I don't think Carson will be as bad as he's been the previous 2 years.
Okay.
The previous year and at the end of his super year. And I think the defense is really coming together. I think they've got a lot of really interesting parts. I love the Buda Baker pick. I love the Hassan Reddick, Chandler Jones, Marcus Golden. These guys are coming together, and I like what they do.
All right, and then Patriots against in the Super Bowl?
Or
maybe I should say Patriots
Packers.
Beating.
Patriots against the Packers. Go with Aaron Rodgers. Go with the quarterback. I think we've got to see more out of the Packers. They've lost some bits on their offensive line. They don't look quite as solid, and it's at times like this I think teams somewhat reevaluate themselves. I do think they've got better on defense, and I think they will have sorted out most of the secondary problems they had last year. They're not going to go from good to great, from poor to great, but they may become, if they can just get the secondary to average, in my opinion. I don't think they'll ever get over letting Casey Hayward go.
Yeah.
I don't know why they did it. Casey Hayward was always a great player for me. I think he had the facility to play on the outside. He had the facility to play on the slot. And they went with youth, and they paid the price last year.
All right. Excellent work as always, Neil. So if anybody out there doesn't or hasn't yet subscribe to Pro Football Focus, it's easy. They just go to the website, and because I've tried it and I've done it, did it years ago. You just go to the website and you're inside in 5 minutes collecting stats, and you've got membership as low as like what, $30 a year if they want to go with that.
It's $40 now for
40,
Edge,
okay.
But that gives you all of our draft guide. It gives you all of our fantasy products, and it gives you all of our player grades. Each of those things on their own are worth $40. So at $40 that's great value. And then for the real DFS player, the guy who wants to get in to all of the stats, we have a $200 option. It's called PFF Elite. It really is that. It's stats that you just literally cannot get anywhere else at a level of detail that beggars belief. So one for the real junkie, but a great product.
All right, Neil. Well, let's do this a couple more times, maybe mid-season, maybe before the playoffs start, and have a great season. Thanks a lot for coming in on our first show, and again, it's been a pleasure knowing you for as many years, and best of luck. Yeah, same here. Best of luck for your new show, Greg, and take care. Happy to come back some other time. Thank you, Neil. Take care. All right, that's Neil Hornsby, again, former founder and current COO at ProFootballFocus.com. I actually worked for ProFootballFocus.com for a short while, sort of like what you would call like a summer gig in a way, when you work for someone part-time for like a few months. and I was transitioning, and there was an opening there for some work. It wasn't my specialty, but I did it, and it was nice learning experience, and I just value that friendship and that relationship as much as you can get from my comments in the last hour from both Neil and Dan Shonka. All right, so let's talk Green Bay Packers football. Interesting that Neil went ahead with the Packers to face the Patriots in the Super Bowl. So we're going to bring in our next guest, who was with me a couple of years ago when talking Green Bay Packers football. He is the managing editor for AcmePackingCompany.com. That's a Green Bay Packer website powered by SBNation.com. Evan Tex Western. Evan, good talking to you again, and thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, Cup's coming in a couple days, and this season wrapping up. Let's get on to some real football.
All right. Well, let me ask you a question, because Neil said something about Casey Hayward. So, and I know you were listening. So, tell me, when Casey Hayward was let go, was that a big shocker to you, or was there a reason for that, or was it just financial?
Yeah, I think it was a surprise that Ted Thompson wasn't willing to at least match the deal that he got in San Diego. It certainly seemed like that was a reasonable deal for the type of performance that he'd put up in 4 years in Green Bay. Like he's saying, he'd had a little bit of success on the outside. He played mostly slot in Green Bay, but had shown some ability to play on the boundary as well. So, yeah, it was definitely a surprise. I think they really banked on Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins taking a big step in their second year.
Okay.
And, the injuries to those two guys, as well as the concussion to Sam Shields, really sapped that unit of depth and of the top guys there. So I think that was the big story, is if that unit stays healthy, we may be talking about this very differently. But fundamentally, that left them without a really good depth piece and potentially a starter in that secondary.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of the new players, rookies and free agents and such that have been added since the end of last season. And you know what? Let's talk about the secondary, because they added their top two picks actually came from the secondary, and Kevin King and Josh Jones. So talk about what you've seen so far. And of course, they also added Devin House in free agency. So talk about those players that were added and what kind of difference that you've seen, if any, that will help this team this season down the road.
Yeah, adding the additional players is big, but again, I mentioned Randall and Rollins, and getting those guys back healthy is going to be a big piece of the puzzle as well. But so far, King is what everybody kind of knew about him coming out of college. He's a hyper athletic guy, got great size, great speed, but he's going to take a little while to really develop into an NFL cornerback. So as far as early impact, you're probably not going to see him play all that much on defense, probably the first half of the season or so, as he really starts to get up to speed, matching up against NFL receivers.
Okay.
But I think long term, if he can harness those talents and those skills that he's got, he's going to be he's certainly got the potential to become a top flight corner in this league. You just don't see many 6'3" guys who run 4.4. So that's certainly exciting. The size and the speed is something the Packers haven't had in the secondary, and Josh Jones brings that as well. You're seeing him used a lot as an inside linebacker in the Packers nickel and dime defense. So kind of the way Morgan Burnett was used a little bit last year. They're definitely banking on that being a personnel grouping that they're going to use a lot this season. So keep an eye on Jones and Burnett as well, moving around, strong safety, inside linebacker, even covering up the slot once in a while too.
All right. And they also went defense with their next two picks in the draft, with Adams, the defensive tackle from Auburn, and Beagle, who was banged up, but had a nice career at Wisconsin. So those were really some of the only main guys, though, that the team added in the offseason for the front seven. Were you surprised about that, or do you at least, especially with Beagle's injury situation, do you think that was enough?
Well, outside linebacker depth, just in general, has been a main concern to this team this offseason. You lose Julius Peppers and Dayton Jones off the edge, and that's almost 1,200, 1,300 snaps that you got to replace from that position. And I think just this afternoon they took a big step to replacing some of that, signing Ahmad Brooks from San Francisco. Just came down with that 1-year contract. So he'll be in there. I think that addition really solidifies a big question mark that this roster had. because nobody had really stepped up behind Clay Matthews and Nick Perry in camp this year. Did a third-round pick in Kyler Fackrell last year, who really hasn't looked to take that step yet. And Jay Ronelliot, a fourth-year player, same kind of thing. He's flashed a little bit in some opportunities once in a while, but just hasn't really broken out. And so Brooks brings you a guy who can probably play 600 snaps or so over the course of the season. He can spell Matthews and Perry. He's a really good run defender. And ultimately, I think that's going to be a big step towards shoring up the depth at that position.
Now, what the whole Brooks situation? You know, on the outside, people could look at Brooks coming from a pretty bad team the last few years, and was this more for San Francisco okay, we're trying to move in another direction, sort of like it was with Cleveland in a way. Brooks is a little older, I think. So let's move in a different direction. And was it anything else? And do you think Brooks, what kind of an impact that you think that he could have with his defense?
Yeah, I think the moving on is the big thing from San Francisco's perspective. I mean, they're going back to a 4-3 defense coming from a 3-4. Brooks has basically always been a 3-4 outside linebacker, so he probably wasn't a great scheme fit to begin with at a 4-3. And so he can come back into Green Bay, play a very similar scheme to what he's used to, and just be a better fit overall.
Okay.
So I think you're going to see him, again, kind of in that Dayton Jones-Peppers kind of rotational pass rusher role. You'll probably get him about 25, 30 snaps a game or so, and that'll be a good spot for him to, if he can come in and provide maybe 5-6 sacks behind Matthews and Perry, and maybe fill in with a spot start or two when one of those two guys inevitably gets banged up a little bit. That's what we're looking for out of him.
All right, let's go to offense. And offensively, first guy taken was Jamal Williams, running back from BYU, and if you throw out the injuries that he had at BYU. I mean, I remember watching him quite a bit, and you definitely saw something there. He said, boy, if this guy stays healthy, he's got a chance. The Packers also drafted Aaron Jones out of UTEP. And I had mentioned last year to Dan Shonka that, keep an eye on this guy. He's a sleeper. I know he's probably not going to be anywhere near a high draft pick. I don't even know if he's going to get drafted. But I've seen UTEP play. And I just like the way he runs. We've seen these running backs that get drafted in the later rounds, succeed at the next level. I asked Dan's opinion, but Dan wasn't very, he talked about a lot of his deficiencies and things of that nature, and didn't really think that was a player that was going to have a great chance or was going to get drafted very high, which he wasn't. But he was drafted in the 5th round, which isn't all that bad at all. I mean, seriously, that was even a little bit higher than I thought, but it sounds like he's having a pretty decent camp. And there's a lot of people saying that between Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones, that there really isn't much of a difference as far as who's leading the other. And if there was a choice of which guy to take, if anything happened to Ty Montgomery, it would almost be like a flip of the coin. Is that the case? Is there one guy out of those two that you think is clearly better than the other from what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I think the big question really for Green Bay comes down to which of those two guys can pass protect better. That, again, protecting Aaron Rodgers is always going to be priority number one for anybody who lines up on that offense around him. And the coaching staff has been very clear that Williams has had a very good camp as far as pass blocking goes, and he's earned pretty much all of the second team reps behind Ty Montgomery. So I would definitely look for Williams to be the first guy in off the bench to spell Ty. He also had some nice plays in the passing game as a receiver as well this past game against Denver, which really kind of helps to boost that status. Now, it was also Jones's best game in the preseason, so you don't want to read too much into that. But personally, I really like what the Packers did at the running back position in the draft. He added guys with very different skill sets, and you're almost looking at an approach kind of similar to the way the Patriots approach the running back position, where you have a couple of different guys with very different skill sets. So a bigger physical runner in Williams, who's a good pass protector. You've got kind of a do-it-all guy with Montgomery, who's gonna be your more complete back, and then a back with some real good receiving talents as well in Jones. So plug them in different positions. I think all three will certainly get snaps, but use them different ways and kind of swap them in and out to fit the game plan. And that's kind of what you'll see this season, I think.
Yeah, you got the two rookies of the all-time leading rushers to their respective schools, Jamal Williams at BYU and Aaron Jones at UTEP. As far as any of the other rookies, we got to mention D'Angelo Yancey. He was a 5th-round pick, a receiver, and also Malachi Dupree was your last draft pick at LSU. This was a kid that was supposed to be a major impact star at LSU. It just never worked out. But we've seen guys like that actually work out at Green Bay before. Just look at Geronimo Allison, who went undrafted. He's in the rotation. So talk a little bit about those two guys, maybe even some of the other receivers on the team, because we know about Jordy Nelson, we know about Randall Cobb. Devontae Adams is somebody that statistically has broken out, and you can thank Aaron Rodgers for that. It looks like in certain games that maybe he's got the drops, but hey, you got Aaron Rodgers to throw the ball to you. You just got to catch the ball a certain percentage of time, and you're going to be able to make plays. And Adams was a playmaker in college. So, but let's get behind those three guys. What's there? What's left, especially if there's an injury to either Adams or Cobb?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Allison. I think he's going to be your de facto number 4 receiver this year. He played a lot on the boundary the last maybe 6 or 7 weeks of the season last year. The coaching staff really likes him. He's made some great plays this preseason. So look at him as your number 4. And then last year's 5th-round pick, Trevor Davis, is probably going to be your number 5. He's had a good camp returning punts for the most part. He had a punt return touchdown in the first preseason game against Philly. So that certainly boosted his stock, and he should be a pretty solid bet to make the roster. Behind those guys, yeah, it's kind of a toss-up. You mentioned Yancey and Dupree, but neither one of those has really done a whole lot in camp. Okay. There's also Max McCaffrey, Christian's brother, who's a second-year guy out of Duke. He's really fighting for a roster spot and brings you some special teams ability as well. So if he doesn't end up getting kept on the roster, I could certainly see him making through out of the practice squad. He'd be a guy that would definitely get a call-up if that's the case at some point if there's an injury. One other guy that's worth noting is Michael Clark. He's a 6'6" guy out of Marshall. He only played 1 year of college football at Marshall after coming over from being a basketball player. But he's a really interesting talent. He's got a great leaping ability. He was just catching fades in the end zone over just about every corner the Packers threw at him in camp. Okay. The problem is he's just incredibly raw as a player. So you leave him on the practice squad for a year, maybe 2. A year or 2 down the road, see what he can do, and he might be able to contribute.
How big of a season do you think, and the impact, do you think that Martellus Bennett might make with this offense?
Bennett's going to be huge. Jared Cook was a big addition to this team last year, but what Bennett really brings is that complete tight end package. He's maybe not quite as explosive a receiver as Cook was, but he's 10 or 15 times the blocker that Cook was. So he's a bigger, more physical guy. He's gonna bring that nasty attitude to the field. And between him and adding Lance Kendricks, that really adds a lot of dimensions to this Packers offense. Mike McCarthy's talked about how he's going to use a lot more 2 tight end sets. The Packers have been, I think, the last in the league in terms of how many times they've lined up with 2 tight ends on the field at the same time over the last 4 or 5 years. Uh-huh. And with Bennett and Kendricks and even Richard Rodgers in there, Richard Rodgers as a number 1 tight end is not what you want. Richard Rodgers is a fantastic number 3 tight end. Mm-hmm. And so by adding those 2 guys, you also add to Rodgers' usefulness to the and you'll see those guys a lot running down the seam. Kendricks lined up in the backfield playing some H-back, lined up in the slot. Bennett used in the red zone as a big target. So I'm thrilled to see that addition. I think Bennett's going to be a great move for this offense, just in terms of the versatility he's going to allow for Mike McCarthy in terms of formations and play calling.
All right, and then the offensive line, they've had a lot of changes there over the years. They've had some injuries in some years, and they've also had some pretty good players there. Of course, we're hearing about the Bulaga injury, and from what we've heard, it sounds like he should be ready for week 1, which is a sigh of relief. Even if you missed 1 week or 2, you don't want to miss Brian Bulaga for the entire season. Of course, Jerry Evans was added. Evans has had a very good career in the NFL. So how confident are you that they have what it takes on the offensive line for that to not be an issue, and to actually, if anything, maybe even solidify everything that they need for a good ground game and to protect Rodgers?
Well, you mentioned, it all comes down to health. If this starting 5 stays together, I'm very confident in this unit being a solid unit. Now, swapping out TJ Lang for Jari Evans, that's probably a downgrade in pass protection a little bit. You'll need to give Evans a little bit more help because Lang was so good at just holding the point of attack one-on-one with the opposing defensive tackle. So you'll probably see a little more help from center Corey Lindsey, shading over to Evans' side a little bit. But overall, this is probably I'd say it's at least a top 5 group of tackles between David Bakhtiari and Bulaga on either side. Lane Taylor has done a really good job filling in for Josh Sitton after he was cut last season. And Lindsley's on the cusp of getting a nice big contract extension since he's in the last year of his rookie deal this year. The question is going to be if any one of those guys goes down, the depth is a major concern right now. Second-year guys, Jason Spriggs, second-round pick last year, Kyle Murphy, a seventh-round pick. They really haven't played particularly well at all this preseason. Spriggs has really struggled when he's come in with the second-team line at left tackle. So there's questions there. Murphy probably would be the guy to play if Bulaga can't go for week 1. But then on the interior, you've got Don Barkley, who's kind of been the overall backup to every interior position. He had an ankle injury, so we're not sure if he's ready to go. And behind him, there's really no answers at the backup center and guard positions. So the Packers are really banking on this starting 5 being healthy this year.
Yeah, it's amazing how many teams out there, especially the good ones. We talked about how bad Seattle before on this show, how bad their offensive line has been for so long, and the Packers have had their share of injuries. I mean, these teams can be elite level teams, but if they have injuries in their offensive line, it ruins everything. It ruins their entire season. Sure, maybe they can win the division, but if you're trying to win a championship, trying to beat the best teams in the conference, and then, of course, potentially try to match up with the Patriots, it's not going to happen if you don't have a healthy offensive line, if you have depth issues, if those guys get hurt. So it just shows you the fine line and the overall parity in the game of football, why it is so important to stay healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And over the past couple of years, the Packers have struggled with that. Again, you saw it in the secondary last year. They were about middle of the pack as far as number of games lost to injury last season, but they were so concentrated at the cornerback position and to some extent in the front 7 as well. And so that was just a killer. So the Packers, if there's one position I think this year that they can least afford an injury, it's there. It's on the offensive line.
Okay, a couple more things before I let you go. By the way, I should have asked you this when we were going over the receivers. How did Adams pass Cobb? How did he become statistically the number 2 receiver on this team?
That's a really good question. I think last year Cobb was playing hurt for a little bit of the season. You finally saw him start to get back to himself in that wild card game against the Giants when he broke out and had a real big game. But I think he was banged up more than he let on. He showed up on the injury report quite a bit.
Okay.
But I also think that Adams has really developed a terrific in-breaking move on in slants and square ends and those sorts of things. And any in-breaking route, he's almost impossible to defend. So look for him to be used very heavily on those type of routes this season again, and that's going to be where he really makes his hay this year.
Okay, and final question. How do the Packers get over the top this year, win another championship with Rodgers? I know there's been calls maybe for Mike McCarthy. Come on, one Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. Time's running out. You got to win another Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, don't you? So, and let's say they're healthy. So let's get the health issue out of the way. What do the Packers have to do to get over the top and beat a team if they're playing like they did last year, like Atlanta or Seattle or whoever else they have to? The Giants, who played them tough in that playoff game. What do they have to do?
Well, if we're assuming good health here, I think the offense is going to be just fine. I'm not concerned about Rodgers' ability to put up the numbers that he has in the past. The receiving core is solid and deep. And I'm a believer in Ty Montgomery as a legitimate running back. So
okay.
I think the offense will pretty much take care of itself. The question is going to be whether or not the Packers pass rush can actually pressure the quarterback on a consistent basis. Last season you saw it where they were probably the worst defense in the NFL against the pass when they did not get pressure. And they were, I think Football Outsiders put them at about 7th or 8th against the pass when they did get pressure on the quarterback. So that just kind of speaks to maybe the youth of the secondary a little bit, but it really tells you that Clay Matthews, Nick Perry, Mike Daniels, those guys have to get home if this defense is going to be successful. And I think that's what's going to do it if they're able to push through and make it back to the Super Bowl.
So is this more then of an issue with Clay having a supporting cast? Has Clay lost a step? Which is it?
Yeah, I think there's something to the latter. I think Perry has definitely seemed to have outplayed him over the last season and a half. I think Perry's probably got to be looked at as your number one guy now from that edge rusher spot.
Wow.
So Matthews is going to move around a lot again.
Okay.
I think you'll see him line up some at inside linebacker again, not as much as he did a couple years ago. But they're going to put him wherever on the field they think they can get a good matchup. And that's something they need to do because his athleticism has definitely dipped a little bit over the last year or two, and he's the kind of guy where he relied on that so much to have success rushing the passer. So look for Perry to be the primary guy, and for Mike Daniels and Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark's another guy to mention. I think he's taken a big step this year in his second season. He and Mike Daniels are going to be scary for offensive lines to try to have to block. So if those guys can provide pressure on the interior, that'll help out Perry and Matthews on the outside. And that in turn will cascade back to the secondary, and they'll have more success making plays on the football and turning the ball back over to Aaron Rodgers.
Okay, Evan, prediction?
Well, Packers win the division. I think it's clear that on paper Green Bay is the best team, and obviously they've got the best quarterback in the division.
Yep.
So that's a safe assumption. I always hate picking the team to go to the Super Bowl, but there's a feeling I think in the air that the investment the team has made on defense, the fact that Ted Thompson has seemed to change his approach a little bit and is actually embracing free agency, bringing in guys like Bennett and House and now Ahmad Brooks today. I think that's a sign that he recognizes that the approach needs to change just a little bit. And I think the pieces are all there for a deep run. I'd love to say I think Rodgers is going to get his second ring. I can never bring myself to necessarily bet on it, but they're certainly going to be right there, I think, in the thick of things at the end of the season.
And who do you fear most in the division? Not to beat you, but to finish second, Detroit or Minnesota?
Minnesota, definitely Minnesota. I think another year Bradford's going to start to develop a little bit more. I think that running game is going to be solid. They've improved the offensive line. I don't think they've fixed the offensive line, but it's definitely better than it was. And Minnesota's defense is for real, and that's a unit that, especially with Mike Zimmer at the helm, they're always going to be a top flight unit. So definitely Minnesota. And I think you can even make an argument for the Bears being, right in there with Detroit in that third spot, kind of creeping, close to 500. Their defense is if they're healthy, they lost a lot of guys to injury on that defense last year, so they could at least be competitive this season, I think.
All right. Well, Evan, we look forward to talking to you again throughout the season. So for Packer fans, they can just go to acmepackingcompany.com and check out all of your content that's out daily. And anything else that you want to throw out there regarding the website or your Twitter? What's your Twitter handle, Evan? Where can they find you on Twitter?
So you can find us at Acme Packing Co. At Acme Packing Co. You can find me at Tex Western. And if you're interested in a little more of a look at the Packers as far as an audio perspective, we've got a real good podcast crew that is putting out episodes every Wednesday morning. So I'd encourage everyone to check that out as well.
Evan, awesome. Great. Thanks once again for chiming in with us, and we look forward to talking to you through the season.
My pleasure, Greg. Thanks a lot. Go Pack, go.
All right. That's Evan Tex Western. I remember that. I remember he used to do that. That was a couple of years ago. Time flies. Yeah, last season was a bit different for us on Prime Sports Network than it was last season. But look, we've talked about this for probably 3 years about putting the Ourlads Football Network together. We didn't exactly say that. I know a lot of times when I talked on our shows, a lot of our shows, usually at the end of them, and especially the football ones, of course, and letting everybody know exactly what we were working on and striving for, and we're going to get there one day. And well, this is it. This is what we were talking about. So this is the first show. of many. And again, it's, as I said at the beginning, it's not just about the show. Matter of fact, if anything, the show is, I'd say it's probably down the middle, 50-50. And it might even be because of the way that the internet is today and what drives traffic. It's really content. I mean, it's great to have the shows. You know, Evan makes his money on content, but he's got the show we just talked about. It's good to have the shows. And that's the background I come from. In the radio industry for, 25 years now. Boy, can I say 25 years now? I think I can. I don't think I'm happy about that. But anyway, what I am happy about is starting the Ourlads Football Network with Dan Shonka at Ourlads.com. And again, Dan has got his scouting background, which is, of course, tremendous. And what he's done on his website, all you have to do, if you go Google NFL depth charts, you're going to see the Ourlads.com website at the very top. That's right, the very top. And it's funny because all the other websites below that are all fantasy sites. And that's not what Dan does. But that's why we've incorporated fantasy coverage to the website. There was fantasy coverage last year, but now we've got full-time fantasy coverage. So last time it was, okay, let's get into some fantasy. Got to. I mean, that's a lot of, Ourlads getting a lot of traffic from fantasy fans. That's why Ourlads has the top depth charts in the industry. They've also, by the way, in case you don't know, have college football depth charts for every Division I team. Okay, and that's FCS. And so, or actually it's FBS, right? Yeah, it's FBS. See, I used to get confused by that, and then the one thing I said, in order for me not to get confused anymore, because I stuck with Division I, and then I said, well, I have to figure out a way to not get confused by FBS and FCS, and the tip that I used, that I just reminded myself of, is which letter's ahead of the other letter in the alphabet, B over C. So B is ahead, and so is Division I football to head. So that's my tip. But I even almost got confused. So which probably, it's still not a bad idea to just call it Division I football. So all of those depth charts are available for college football, FBS Division I teams. And then, of course, you've got Neil Hornsby at Pro Football Focus, who joined us. We talked a whole lot about Neil's background and our relationship. So you can go to profootballfocus.com, and we'll look to have Neil back a few times during the season. Of course, Neil, I don't know if you know this, but if you've just joined our website or just joined the show, Neil and I did shows for 3 seasons. About, I'd say, I think the last show we did was about 3 years ago. Okay, that was right at the time, because as you heard in the interview, when Neil sold the business, that was the season before we sold the business was our last season. So we had 3 years, 3 seasons straight of weekly podcasts. It was a Pro Football Focus show, and we aired that, and they promoted it at Pro Football Focus, and we had great time, did a ton of shows, and it was the only show that Neil did on a consistent basis. Now, of course, he did interviews all the time, but just like Dan Shonka. You know, Dan does a million interviews for scouting, and of course, before the draft. But the only show that Dan did on a regular basis, and we still do, was this show, was our show, which was the Ourlads Guide to the 2017 draft. We did that. I think we've been doing that about 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer, probably longer, to tell you the truth. But anyway, yeah, just to go back, Neil and I did shows for about 3 seasons, and it was the only show that Neil did on a consistent basis. So I was really proud of that. Very proud of the relationship between both of them. And look, getting Neil on, it it wasn't something I did on purpose. I didn't say, okay, I'm going to get Neil Hornsby on the first show. It just worked out that way. It could have been any day this week, could have been next week. And it was perfect timing the way it worked out to get both Neil on and Dan on in the first hour of the first show. Also, of course, want to thank Evan Western over at, and by the way, yes, I can probably understand. I should have asked Evan why he uses text in there. I'm sure there's a couple of different reasons. One of the reasons that would make sense to me is if you actually Google Evan Western, you see a bunch of Evan Westerns, you don't see Evan text in there. So the text kind of distinguishes Evan over everyone else. That's my feeling on the matter. So tomorrow, 2:30, we have our 2017 NFL season preview special. My co-host for the entire season for Thursdays. Now, it's not going to be every Thursday at 2:30, but it will be tomorrow. So usually, 95% of the time, it's going to be in the afternoon, early afternoon, like between 1 and 4 Eastern time, every Thursday. And that's going to be Tony Mejia. Now, Tony is another guy, like Neil, that did shows with me years ago. Matter of fact, Tony goes way back, even before Neil. Tony goes way back to almost the beginning of this network, probably a couple of years in. Tony and I did shows when he was the senior writer and producer at CBS Sportsline. So we did NFL and college football shows. I did that for a couple of seasons. And Tony was also an NBA writer. So he's got an NBA background as well. But right now he's an independent sports columnist and the exclusive handicapper at VegasInsider.com. And that is a huge company. So he knows, he goes to Vegas to handicapping contests. He has to do his job in order to be effective. He must know what he's doing to make a living. See, there's a difference between in the gambling industry, which isn't such a voodoo topic anymore. Maybe, actually not even maybe. I know when we were doing shows, me and Tony, and I know when Tony made the transition over to being a handicapper, it was more still it was still kind of voodoo, but you can see that it was those walls, those barriers were breaking. And then within a year or two, they were down. And he made the transition at the perfect time. You're hearing now, it's amazing when you're watching network coverage of sporting events now, or on ESPN or any of those other networks, cable networks. And you get these prestigious announcers that will bring up, remember 10 years ago, 5 years ago, they would just kind of whisper about, like, if the game was a blowout at the end and if the over and under was determined on a late touchdown with 10 seconds left, they'd kind of say something, reference it, like wink, wink, that actually might have meant something and cost Vegas $1 million either way. They don't even wink anymore. Just go, whether it's on the web or whether it's on television, they'll just talk about it. Hey, so-and-so is the favorite, so-and-so, especially if you get into other events, whether it's tennis or golf, which I watch and I have to cover for other shows, or NASCAR. Forget it. They don't even care. They talk about the odds. They talk about the picks. And so that is something that in that industry, you really have to know your stuff. Tony knows his stuff. And I was glad when he accepted the role to be with me every week, all season long, talking NFL. So it'll be our NFL. Now, it doesn't mean we're not going to have college football coverage, because we will. So, matter of fact, I'm putting together a college football preview that hopefully will be ready to go. I just haven't decided yet if we're going to do a show or content, but that will be ready to go before Saturday. So, but what I did say, maybe ready to go, I should say that. Because one of the things I've talked about in the past about college football is because I say this all the time with the polls. I don't believe the polls should be around for the first month or two. I think they're ridiculous. I think it's wrong that teams that are like ranked in the preseason 25th are like fighting and clawing, and they lose one game, they're done. Yet nowadays in college football, if you're like ranked in the top 10 or in the top 5, like we've seen with Alabama, you lose a game, it's okay. Or like Ohio State, you lose a game, it's okay. Heck, last year Ohio State lost a game to a team that beat them in the same division and still leapfrogged them to the postseason, which we were hysterically upset about last year. and thought that was wrong because we knew Penn State deserved to be, and I still know Penn State deserved to be in the postseason and not Ohio State. Well, the playoffs and not Ohio State. And then, of course, we got the proof in the games. Because, look, we all know it's nice to have this little end one formula, to have a 4-team so-called playoff, because I don't really call it a playoff when you have 4 teams. I mean, what's that? How do you go from 2 to 4 teams and all of a sudden you call it a playoff? Come on. This is just an N1 game. That's all it is. But a real playoff is coming. 8 teams, 16, whatever, whether it's 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, or 10 years down the road, it'll happen. And don't listen to anybody that complains and says or criticizes and says things like, yeah, but if there's 8 teams, the 9th team is going to complain. Or if there's 16 teams, the 17th team is going to complain. You know what? Nobody, as far as the people who really matter, which are the fans, no fans really care, okay? They don't. They want a playoff. They don't care if anybody complains at 9. You want to know why? That they don't care that nobody complains at 9 or that anybody can complain at 17? Because they're complaining now at 5. So what's the freaking difference? Especially because of the fact that the people who are complaining about being number 5 or number 6 are right. Because USC and Penn State should have been in the postseason. USC beats Washington in Washington. Penn State beats Ohio State, okay, and wins their conference championship game. Who goes to the postseason? Which 2 teams get in? The 2 teams that got destroyed in the playoffs, Washington and Ohio State. And somebody's going to try to convince me that system's working. That's nonsense. Everybody knew that USC and Penn State were better than Washington and Ohio State. But it doesn't matter in college football. The head-to-head doesn't matter. Just doesn't. They don't care. They don't care if you beat the other team. It doesn't work that way in college football. That's why it's not a playoff. It's politics. It don't matter. So we'll eventually get there. We'll get to 8. We'll get to 16. I won't talk about this a whole lot. Trust me, it's a subject that I'll talk about once or twice a year, and that's it. Unless I have to make a point about something specific. But it's one of those things because politics are involved, so it's just like politics. It's like the real world of politics. It drives you crazy. And why does it drive you crazy? Because you can't do anything about it. Oh yeah, we can vote this guy off but one person, come on, unless we're loaded, we have so much money we can throw in, we could buy elections. I mean, come on. We have no say. So it's frustrating, and when things are frustrating and there's really nothing you can do about it, as far as I'm concerned, I stay out of it. I'll get it off my chest a couple of times a year like this for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm done. And everybody knows what's going on. But my point was that because I have been critical of the polls and I have been critical of a lot of stuff, and that's why Dan said that he's not going to put out his draft guide for his early draft guide booklet, which is coming out in about a month or so. He's not going to put that out until he watches some games. And so the way I think is, I mean, why should I sit there and draw up content or predictions and things of that nature, or spend a whole lot of time doing it when I got a whole bunch of other things to do, when I haven't even seen a preseason game. There isn't even at least a preseason game to watch. What am I supposed to watch, a spring game? I mean, it's the only time, especially, I mean, look how many players. Look at Sam Darnold. There are so many players in college football that don't or haven't played for those teams the year before, whether they're transfers, whether they were they had to sit out a year, transfers, graduate or sit out a year, whether or not they're freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores that didn't play when they were freshmen. There's so much talent in college football that can determine. Okay, not usually for the great teams like Alabama, even though they had a quarterback that was a freshman last year that went all the way to the championship game and almost won. Okay, doesn't happen a whole lot, but it almost happened for Alabama. So that's the point. There's so many guys you've never seen before, except for spring practice and two-hand touch, which is what it is. That how are you going to rank teams How are you going to do that, and how are you even going to predict properly? You just can't. All you can do is best guess, and that's all these polls are. They're not polls, they're guesses. They're best guesses. So let's watch a game or two. And I only say a game or two because I want to make sure it's not like against, Alabama against Alabama A&M. All right, let's watch a game or two. And because look, Alabama, Florida State. Well, how am I supposed to make a prediction on that when, as I mentioned before with Dan, look at all the players that left Alabama last year. All the key players. Okay, they got the quarterback back. I know, okay, they got the quarterback, running back, receiver, and they got a heck of a whole lot of talent. We know that. But these are new guys, like the old guys, that have to step up. They move up the ladder, not necessarily into the starting lineup for some of them, but yes, some of them do. But other guys have, which were like the 7th or 6th best player on the defense, now all of a sudden is the first top guy. Now, and that's a good thing. It doesn't mean that player isn't any good, and that player probably does become maybe the next big deal at Alabama. But you don't know from every year. You don't know how they're going to handle these roles. So you don't know. You can just guess and say, oh, Nick Saban, he always wins. They always win. They always win. Oh, they're just going to reload. Okay, yeah, it's a logical guess. They're going to reload. Yes, okay, that's great. And then for Florida State, all right, we've got a little bit more to go on. They lost some players, though. But, yeah, we got something to go on there, too. And there's a lot of talk about Florida State. I think I tell you right now, and I haven't even looked at the line yet. I've been so busy. I have no idea what the line is. I would think it's got to be somewhere around 7 to 10 points. I would think for Alabama, but I don't know. But I would think Alabama would win. I don't trust Florida State right now. I mean, I know this kid Francois is okay. He's got talent, but everybody was thinking about he was going to be the next Jameson Winston last year. Now, I don't know if he's going to make that leap this year. Maybe he will. It's possible. And if he does, okay, maybe Florida State, with all the other talent they have around them, maybe they will be ready to go back to the postseason. I mean, the real postseason, according to college football, and try to win a championship. But I wouldn't bet on that. How do you not bet Alabama? Because the line is not going to be too big. So how do you not bet Alabama? Because I would. But you don't know. You don't know. We'll find out at Florida State, especially because it's a lot different in college than pros from taking that next step. When you take the next step from the first year to the second year, or the second year from the third year in the NFL, as opposed to that next step in college. Because the next step in college can happen dramatically faster, whether you played the year before or not, whether you were like Sam Darnold. You can make huge leaps from year to year in college. Huge. You can be a guy nobody's heard of before. That doesn't happen in the pros. Everybody knows who they are. You don't have a nobody in the NFL, and then all of a sudden you're a superstar the next year. Now, sure, you may be somebody that, okay, maybe had 500 yards rushing, and the next year you had 1,500. But I knew who that guy was. Not in college. College, you could be absolutely just, where are you on the depth chart? I can't even find you one year. And the next year, you're battling for the Heisman. Another joke, by the way, which I will just throw into the garbage. I don't even want to ever talk about the Heisman, just like I don't want to talk about the playoff system. The Heisman's a joke. It's a statistical contest. Jackson had no right winning the Heisman last year. He was not the best player in college football. He had several opportunities to prove that he was the type of player that could lead his team. Who led his team against which quarterback won the Clemson Louisville game? When he had a chance in the red zone at the end of that Louisville Clemson game, did he get that team in the end zone? No. Did Deshaun Watson do what he did and had to do? And I know they give out the Heisman before the championship game, but they shouldn't. And what happened? Watson did what he had to do. And the year before was the biggest joke when Christian McCaffrey didn't win. And even Keenan Reynolds should have been close to winning the Heisman. He didn't get anywhere near the type of votes a couple of years ago that he should have. It's a statistical contest. Oh, Lamar Jackson goes out and throws for 8,000 yards in the first game against like Alcorn State. And all of a sudden he goes from being 91 in the Heisman voting in the preseason to like 10-1 or 7-1 the next week. And then the week after that, he's like the favorite. And all he has to do at that point is just keep putting up 400-yard games against weak competition and, rushing for 4 touchdowns and throwing for 3 against nobodies, and you're going to win the Heisman. What is that? The Heisman should be a little about stats, but a lot more about what you do, sort of like an MVP, what you do to lead a team. And then you must have the signature play. You must have some play, some moment, some Heisman moment. So when people go back and look at you as a Heisman winner that year, they will go, I remember that play. I remember that game. It doesn't have to be winning a championship. It just has to be something. We go back to Lamar Jackson. What are we looking at? Well, I can't really pick a play, but I can pick a lot of plays. I can pick some touchdown runs and touchdown passes and this and that. But yeah, I mean, I can't even pick a game that I can't even. What happened in that LSU game at the end of the season? He got destroyed. He got hammered by that LSU defense. Destroyed because that was a real defense. Just imagine if Louisville was in the SEC last year. Lamar Jackson doesn't come anywhere close to winning the Heisman. What are you, crazy? He didn't face those types of defenses week in and week out. The Heisman is a joke. Just like the playoff system. And just like the playoff system, the Heisman, all politics. All political. And they can keep their political awards and they can keep their political ridiculous playoff billboards for what, again, it's just an N1 game. Because I say this every year at the beginning of the year. I say a couple times during the season. College football during the regular season is my favorite sport. I love it more than the NFL. But get to the end of the season, once the regular season's over in college football, and college football becomes like my, I don't know, maybe 5th favorite sport. Maybe it might even be worse. Because I hate the bowl matchups. Out of the 90 bowls there are nowadays, it's like I'm lucky if there's like 2 of them where I go, okay, I like that matchup. I want to watch that game. So that's a complete waste of time. And then what happened, like what happened before this N1 situation, we used to hate when some teams got screwed from not being in that BCS game, and now we're getting screwed anyway by putting Washington and Ohio State in over USC and Penn State. Now, what we will do, because it's necessary, because it's the beginning of the season, and that's why I'm probably going to, at least this week, just spend some time on futures. We'll take a look at the futures to win the championship, because that's real. That's something that matters. It's not a poll. This matters. Those futures go down, and you're losing an opportunity. A team could be 40-1 one week. By the time we actually do sort of like okay, now we'll kind of put together a rankings or a sort of like a, predictions. Okay, we've seen a game or two. All right, now we've seen everybody play. And again, you don't have to have an Alabama-Florida State matchup. It's not necessary. But you've all at least played, like at least say Alabama would have played like even Wake Forest. That's good enough for me. It's not Alcorn State or Alabama A&M. So as long as once I get to see every team play one game after the first couple of weeks, then we'll talk about, okay, let's put something together. We'll talk about it, write about it. But I will put a futures report together for sure. We'll drum that up before Saturday's games. Because I don't even know what games are really important. Let me see. Before Saturday, I know my one of my teams is. That's Rutgers, and that's because I'm from Jersey. Okay, so give me a break. Yeah, I think actually the Rutgers-Washington game is the biggest game on Friday as far as teams from Power 5 conferences, and I don't know what this Ohio State-Indiana thing is doing on Thursday. There are 15 games tomorrow, but most of those games are crap. And Ohio State, Indiana, it's very, very unusual to see a conference matchup in the first week of the season. So I don't know what that's about, but good. Okay. So Ohio State, Indiana Thursday, Rutgers, Washington Friday. And look, I don't even care about Ohio State. So even if I get the futures report in a day or two, trust me, I am not picking Ohio State to win the national championship. I'm not putting them in my futures. They're way too low with their number anyway. Nor do I think that they're going to win a championship. And I've seen enough of Barrett already to know that that's just not going to happen. And that has taken nothing away from what a great coach Urban Meyer is, because he is. So by the time we get in the information before Saturday, that's all we have to do, because you got Alabama, Florida State, BYU, LSU could be interesting. I don't care about what BYU did with Portland State. I'm sure they were holding back. Florida, Michigan. Michigan's my team, of course. They're my team due to the fact that I grew up in New Jersey. And when Rutgers at the time, they were pretty much nobodies. They were nobodies for a very long time until Shiano took over. And then I was all grown up. But by that time, when you're young like I was, and you don't have cable TV at my age, back in the day, you had your local games every week, and you had to pick games to watch. So you were either, I don't know, Ohio State, Michigan fans, Texas fans, Oklahoma fans, USC fans, Alabama fans. I don't even know how. Yeah, Alabama was on, of course. Yes, Alabama. But not as many SEC teams as there are now, of course. You had to pick between those teams. Notre Dame. Which of those teams did you go for? And I went with Michigan. And matter of fact, when I went with Michigan and I was growing up, Jim Harbaugh was the quarterback there. So that's how long I've known Jim Harbaugh, or have been a fan of Jim Harbaugh as far, and followed his career playing and now coaching, and coming full circle to now coaching my favorite team. Now I will say this, because I am from New Jersey and I'm a Rutgers fan first. If Rutgers played Michigan for the Big Ten championship, I would root for Rutgers. That's just my New Jersey loyalty. But they're in the same division, so that's not happening anyway. And then the other game is UCLA, Texas A&M, and I believe that game is on Sunday. So we'll get an opportunity to see Rosen and see what he does first of all. And if he could, by the way, I'm not a big Jim Mora fan. Jim Mora has done a good job recruiting, kind of like what Pete Carroll did at USC. Just recruit the heck out of that area, and you're going to win a ton of games, no matter how good a coach you really are. But Pete Carroll's a good coach, better coach than Jim Mora. But Jim Mora is just recruited well, and that's more than half the battle in college athletics is recruiting. But he's not capable as a coach of doing anything special at UCLA. Matter of fact, I think he's done a good enough job that if UCLA was smart, what they would do is, and maybe they've already done this, is they would start thinking about a replacement. They would start thinking about, okay, who could we get in here? Is there somebody that's going to be like a Jim Harbaugh? Is there somebody out there, maybe a former UCLA guy that's out there, assistant coach somewhere, or maybe even a coach somewhere, that we can bring in here in the next couple of years? And then we're going to that's the guy we're going to go after. Because you don't want to get rid of Jim Mora and then just bring in who they had before that. Because, Neuheisel was a cast off, another retread. But guys, their coaching situation, Jim Mora looks like a genius compared to a lot of the guys that were there for quite a bit. It's been a long time since UCLA was really relevant. But you don't get rid of a guy like Jim Mora yet, unless you really have your eye on somebody that you say, you know what, okay, Mora's done a good job. He's brought the program back. Now let's get that guy, and he'll take us over the top. So we'll see what kind of season they have. Because look, if Mora can't get UCLA to win the Pac-12, at least get to the Rose Bowl with Josh Rosen, then I'm not even waiting. I'll fire him. And I'll open up right away. Okay, who wants to come coach here at UCLA? You have to get UCLA with Josh Rosen to the Rose Bowl, or else you need to be fired. And if Darnold and Rosen leave after this year, then you've got one more season to go. Okay, so anyway, wanted once again thank Dan Shonka, of course, at Ourlads.com, here on the Ourlads Football Network, and Neil Hornsby from Pro Football Focus and Evan Tex Western from the acmepackingcompany.com, covering the Green Bay Packers. So tomorrow, 2:30, NFL season preview. That's a 1-hour show with Tony Mejia, my co-host. Then right after Tony's 1 hour preview at 3:30 and 4 o'clock, actually 3:30, yeah, probably like around, well, let's just say right after our preview, we're going to have two guests from rival AFC North, Baltimore and Pittsburgh. We're going to have Matthew Stevens, who's the managing editor of BaltimoreBeatdown.com, and Jeff Hartman, the editor for BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. So they'll be my special guests tomorrow after our 1 hour season preview with Tony Mejia. So 2:30 to 3:30 with Tony, give or take a few minutes. Then right after that, same program. We're not going anywhere. We don't have breaks. We don't have to worry about commercial breaks here, nor will you ever have to worry about commercial breaks here. You know, even when we start rolling in a whole bunch of different sponsorships and things of that nature, which is something that is we haven't even, trust me, we've got other things coming in revenue-wise that we haven't even had to touch that. But when we do start implementing that into the shows, there'll be live reads. So we won't have to go to breaks. Even though a break once in a while would be a nice thing for me as a host. Try to consider that whenever you listen to a long show like this. Try to consider that I've been on the air now for an hour and a half without a break, and it's not easy. Sometimes I'll say something that's maybe a little off, or you're like, why did he say that? Or that doesn't even make any sense. I mean, I don't get 10 or 15 minutes. I don't get a break every 10 or 15 minutes like a lot of other talk show hosts. Okay, so anyway, so that's tomorrow at 2:30. Then Friday, we have our fantasy football show with the Ourlads.com chief fantasy analyst Jamal Murphy. So that's 2 o'clock Friday, the premiere of our fantasy football coverage on Ourlads, the Ourlads Football Network. And then I don't know yet. I'm trying to finalize another show on Friday, the Ourlads Football Network, with Ken Marangolo. If you are familiar with our work at Prime Sports Network, Ken is my co-host with Nat Scraps. It's a Washington Nationals baseball show that we've done for the last few seasons. Ken also did a preview for the Washington Redskins that we posted up on Ourlads' website. Ken will be on. We're trying to finalize a time on Friday. Now, I don't know if I'm going to skip that and have him come on next week. That's possible, but that's just something we may do on Friday as well. Okay, so again, tomorrow, 2:30, Ourlads Football Network season preview show with Tony Mejia. And then on Friday, it is our fantasy coverage. And you know what? Let me use this one. And we will talk to you again tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in to the Ourlads Football Radio Network right here on the PrimeSportsNetwork.com. Actually, we're in the studios at PrimeSportsNetwork.com. And check us out on YouTube and on our Facebook page. We'll see you next time.
For tuning in to this PrimeSportsNetwork.com production. Additional PSN programs are available on demand and conveniently located on our website, as well as our official YouTube and iTunes pages under Prime Sports Network. You can also check us out on Twitter at PrimeSN. Once again, thanks for listening to Ourlads Football Radio Network.